Welcome, fellow humans. Today I'm going to tell the story of how I stopped being a perfectionist. Now, I do believe that every human being should be trying to become the best version of themselves that they can be. And so I am still working on self-improvement. But when I was a teenager, I was a perfectionist. I was really focused on trying to be as close to perfect as I could be, and I knew that I would never be perfect. I was not that unrealistic, but it really bothered me how flawed I was, and so I was constantly working to improve every flaw within me that I could. And to an extent, this was a good thing. It's an important part of growth. You're supposed to be spending your childhood developing in all sorts of ways, and I do think even throughout adulthood, people should be growing and improving and learning new things. But I realized that my perfectionism was actually a flaw. I got to a point where I was working on the various different flaws I had, and then it occurred to me that the biggest flaw that I hadn't addressed was actually my perfectionism. Because while perfectionism feels kind of good when you have it, it feels like you're trying to be so great and that should make you into a better person than if you don't have this force. My perfectionism was actually holding me back, as it so often does, because it would create anxiety around failure and mistakes. And learning and growth involves a lot of failure and mistakes. It can be really hard to try new things and to develop your skills when failure feels that bad. And every time you start doing something new, you're bad at it. Certainly for me, every time I start doing something new, I'm really bad at it at first, and I have to develop skills, I have to practice. And perfectionism can make that really, really hard. I realized that instead of focusing on how flawed I was and how many mistakes I made and how I needed to be perfect, I needed to focus on how can I become better? What can I do to improve myself? How can I work on growing my skills, becoming a better person, and that sort of thing, rather than aiming for perfection, just focusing on what can I do right now to try to be better. And as I realized that my perfectionism was holding me back and was my biggest flaw, something happened in my brain where I decided that in order to be a perfectionist, I had to not be a perfectionist, because I could not be perfect if I was a perfectionist. And what I still had of my perfectionism could not allow that. It could not accept me being a perfectionist, because being a perfectionist was a flaw, and it was not okay for me to have flaws. And then I just sort of logicked itself away. My perfectionism just ate itself, and I stopped being a perfectionist. I'm not saying that this would work for anybody else. There might be someone else out there in the world who's like me, who would work for, in which case, great. But I know that I'm weird. I'm just saying that this is what happened for me personally. And I've always been amused by it, that I lost my perfectionism to my perfectionism. Anyhow, that's my story about how I stopped being a perfectionist, and I am still doing my best to become the best person that I can be. If you liked it, please click like. If you know someone who you think might be interested in it, by all means share. And if you would like more similar content, then please subscribe. But most of all, if you have any similar experiences, any thoughts or questions, or any related stories, maybe you lost your perfectionism in some different weird way, I would love to read your comments. Thank you.